Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 4th August 2019. So let us start our discussion. Now, in continuation of our series of discussion of the questions which appeared in the preliminary examination of 2019 and were also covered in the Daily News Simplified, let us take up this question. So this question reads, as per the Solid Waste Management Rules 2016 in India, which one of the following statements is correct? Now, the Solid Waste Management Rules of 2016 were covered in the DNS of 7th February 2018 and also in the DNS of 11th April 2018. So if you look at the first option, it reads, waste generator has to segregate the waste into 5 categories. Now, in the DNS of 11th April 2018, it was discussed that the waste has to be segregated into 3 categories. The first is the biodegradable waste, second is non-biodegradable waste, and the third is domestic waste. So you can easily eliminate the option A. The second option reads, the rules are applicable to notified urban local bodies, notified towns and all industrial townships only. Now, if you look at the discussion in the DNS, it reads that the area of jurisdiction has been extended in the rules of 2016. And now it has been extended to urban agglomerations, census towns, notified industrial townships, areas under Indian railways, airports, ports, special economic zones, etc. And all this has been done in order to achieve the objectives of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So after this, you can easily eliminate the option B. And similarly, in the DNS of 7th February 2018, we had discussed the increase in jurisdiction of the solid waste management rules of 2016 and also the categories in which the waste is to be segregated. Now, the last option reads that it is mandatory on the part of waste generator that the waste generated in one district cannot be moved to another. Now, further in the same DNS, it was discussed that the source segregation was required to improve the waste to wealth concept. And this enabled the recovery, reuse and recycle of the waste which is generated. Now, if the waste so generated is to be recovered, reused and recycled, its transportation from one district to another district cannot be restricted. And that is why the option D becomes incorrect. So if you logically eliminate the options A, B and D, the only option that is left is C. That is, the rules provide for exact and elaborate criteria for the identification of sites for landfills and waste processing facilities. Hence, the correct answer here was C. Now, after this, let us start our discussion for today's newspaper. Now, this article on page number 15 talks about India's ambitious deep sea mining project. So, this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic Geography and also under the topic Environmental Issues. Now, in this article, we will try to understand some key facts from our preliminary examination point of view related to deep sea mining. In this, we will look at what is meant by the term polymetallic nodules, which all minerals are found in these polymetallic nodules, also which body allots the areas for deep sea mining into the oceans, and what has been the association of India relating to deep sea mining, and what are the important environmental concerns, and when will such deep sea mining projects become economically viable. So let us look at some of these points. Although most of the points have been mentioned in this article clearly, we will restructure them from our exam point of view. Now, this deep ocean mission has been in news because the Ministry of Earth Sciences has announced that it will launch the deep ocean mission this year, and it will be a rupees 8,000 crore plan. Now, the main aim of this deep ocean mission is to explore and extract the polymetallic nodules. So what is important here is to learn that what is meant by this term polymetallic nodules. So these are small potato-like rounded balls which are composed of important minerals like manganese, nickel, cobalt, copper and iron hydroxide. And these rounded balls lie scattered on the ocean floor at the depths of around 6,000 meters, and their size can vary from a few millimeters to centimeters. So as you can see in this picture, these are the actual pictures of the polymetallic nodules. Now, millions of such polymetallic nodules balls are scattered over the ocean bed. And that is why countries and the scientific community is interested in these polymetallic nodule balls, because they are large in number and they provide resources of important minerals like manganese, nickel, cobalt, copper, and iron hydroxide. So now this aspect becomes important for us from preliminary, that which all minerals are found in the polymetallic nodules. Now, besides this, what is the use of such polymetallic nodules? So these metals which are extracted from these polymetallic nodules can be used in electronic devices, smartphones, batteries, and for solar panels. That is why they are economically very much valuable. Now, there are various theories of how these polymetallic nodules are formed. However, the most prominent theory is that these are those metals which are precipitated from the seawater and especially from the volcanic thermal vents. So when these small volcanic vents, they give out lava or magma, this gets cooled and gets converted into and precipitates into these polymetallic nodules. Now the exact origin of these polymetallic nodules is a matter of debate and has not been finalized as such. And the extraction of such polymetallic nodules is known as deep sea mining, because it is the process of retrieving mineral deposits from the area of ocean below 200 meters. So as you can see in this diagram, these polymetallic nodules are scattered and spread over the ocean bed, and these can be found up to the depth of about 4,000 to 6,000 meters. Now after this, let us understand who allots the area for this deep sea mining. So an international body with the name International Seabed Authority, which is an autonomous international organization established under the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas, which is abbreviated as UNCLOS, allots the area for the deep sea mining. And this UN clause was signed in the year 1982. Now, as oceans are the global commons, they do not fall under the authority of any particular country. That is why the members of the United Nations have signed this UN Convention on the Law of Sea, which operates and regulates the movement of ships, exploration of minerals, and it also provides the definitions for exclusive economic zones, etc. Now, what has been the India's involvement in deep sea mining? So, India was the first country to receive the status of pioneer investor in the year 1987. And it was given an area of about 1.5 lakh square kilometers in the central Indian Ocean basin for nodule exploration. So the area which is identified as polymetallic mineral nodules rich in the Indian Ocean is known as the Central Indian Ocean Basin, or CIOB. Now in the year 2002, India signed a contract with the International Seabed Authority. And after a resource analysis, India had surrendered about 50% of the area under its exploration. So as we know that India had got the exploration rights for 1.5 lakh square kilometers in the 1987. So presently India has retained an area of about 75,000 square kilometers for the exploration and extraction of the polymetallic nodules in the Central Indian Ocean basin. Now, which are the other areas where such polymetallic nodules are found? So these are identified from Central Pacific Ocean and also at some places in the Atlantic Ocean. And the zone in the Pacific Ocean where the polymetallic nodules are found in abundance is known as the Clarion-Clipperton zone. So this can be another important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, besides this, environmental concerns have been raised regarding the exploration and mining of such polymetallic nodules. So in this regard, the IUCN, or the International Union for Conservation of Nature, has said that these deep remote locations can be home to unique species that have adapted themselves to the conditions like poor oxygen and sunlight and high pressure. Now, such mining expeditions can make them go extinct even before they are known to the scientific community. So the IUCN fears that various species which are adapted to the deep sea zone can become extinct because of such deep sea mining projects. Further, it has raised the concerns of noise pollution at the deep sea level, light pollution and oil spills during such exploration projects. Now, is the deep sea mining economically viable? So in this regard, the International Seabed Authority has said that it will be commercially viable only if about 3 million tons of polymetallic nodules are mined per year. Now, further studies are being conducted on the economic viability of exploration and extraction of such polymetallic nodules. So, from preliminary examination point of view, you need to understand that the minerals which are found in the polymetallic nodules are important Further, which authority or which international body allots the area for deep sea mining is important. Also, the zone in the Pacific Ocean where the polymetallic nodules are formed, which is known as the Clarion-Clipperton zone, is also important. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 14 seeks to analyze the reasons for poor monetary policy transmission in India. And it also highlights that low interest rates alone may not be sufficient to boost economic growth in India. So, this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Economic Development. Now, currently it is being said that the Indian economy is facing a slowdown. So, in response to this, the RBI has lowered the repo rates to a 9-year low of 5.75%. Now, despite the cuts in the policy rate, the economic growth has failed to pick up due to poor monetary policy transmission. So, in this context, let us try and understand why is the monetary policy transmission inefficient in India, and also we'll try to understand, are the low interest rates alone sufficient to boost the economic growth in India? Now, first let us understand what is meant by this term monetary policy transmission. Now, the Reserve Bank of India uses monetary policy tools like repo rate and reverse repo rate to control the money supply in the economy. Now, as you would have read in the economy, the repo rate is the rate at which the commercial banks would borrow from the RBI, while the reverse repo rate is the reverse of this rate, and it is the rate of interest they would earn when they deposit funds with the central bank. Now, normally the Reserve Bank of India keeps this reverse repo rate at a lower rate as compared to that of the repo rate. Now, in this context, the monetary policy transmission refers to the commensurate changes in the rate of interest on the loans with the changes in the policy rates like the repo rate or the reverse repo rate. So, simply the monetary policy transmission means what will be the impact on the interest rates in the market when the RBI changes its policy rates like the repo rates. Now, in this case, we will look at two scenarios with the help of a flow chart. Now, first is that what will be the impact if the RBI reduces the repo rate? Now, as we have read, the repo rate is the rate at which the commercial banks borrow from the RBI. Now, if the repo rate is reduced, the banks will avail loans from the RBI at a lower interest rate. Now, this will lead to a reduction in the rate of interest on the loans in the market. So, all the borrowers in the market will be able to avail the loans from the banks at a lower rate of interest. Now, if the borrowers are able to borrow at a lower interest rate, it will lead to an increase in the investment and consumption expenditure. And ultimately, it will lead to an increase in the GDP growth rate because, as we know that, simply when the investment and the consumption increases, the GDP growth rate increases. Now, conversely, if the RBI increases the repo rate, the banks will avail loans from the RBI at a higher rate of interest. Now, as the banks are borrowing from the RBI at higher rate, it will lead to an increase in the interest rate on the loans for the borrowers in the economy. And due to this, there will be a decrease in the money supply because the borrowers will not find it attractive to take loans at such high interest rates. Now, this measure is generally implemented to control the inflation. And the negative impact of this is that when the repo rate increases, the growth generally slows down. Now, although theoretically the impact of changes in the repo rate by the RBI on the economy has been explained simply. However, in reality, such a correlation is not that simple and it depends on various other factors besides the changes in the repo rates. So, in this context, let us understand why is the monetary policy transmission inefficient in India. Now, this monetary policy transmission in India has been inefficient because the banks have failed to transmit the rate cut to the customers. So, this means that although the RBI has reduced the repo rates, the banks have not considerably or commensurately reduced the interest rates for the borrowers. Now, the funds which are available with the commercial banks are mainly constituted by the deposits from the public. And these deposits from the public are used by the banks to lend to the borrowers. Now, the rates at which the public deposit their funds with the banks have been considerably high. And the main reason for this has been that the interest rates in the other competing government small savings schemes have remained high, and hence the banks have been forced to maintain a higher interest rate to attract the customers or the funds. Now the thing to understand here is that the government small savings schemes are providing higher interest rate for the depositors. Now due to this competition to attract the funds from the depositors, the banks also have to maintain a higher interest rate. Now if the banks are getting deposits at higher interest rates, they cannot lend it to the customers at a lower interest rate. And that is why there has been a poor monetary policy transmission, and the rate cut by the RBI has not been transmitted to the borrowers in the market. Now, recently, as we all know, that there was a non-banking financial company crisis, which is known as the IL&FS. Now, this crisis created a liquidity crunch in the market. Now, as the liquidity is already low in the market, the banks are attracting the deposits from the customers at higher interest rate, and that is why, due to these higher interest rate on the deposits, the banks are not able to easily lend it at a lower interest rate. So this is another reason for poor monetary policy transmission. Further, what should be the repo rate and how the RBI should change its policy rates has been a matter of tussle between the central bank, that is the RBI, and the government. In this regard, it has been said that the government normally takes a short-term view of the economy and constantly pressurizes the central bank to lower the interest rate so as to increase the investment in the economy, and ultimately it will lead to an increase in the GDP. However, the central banks have to take a long-term view of the economy. That is why it believes that the lower interest rates in the long run will lead to increase in the money supply, and this increased money supply will ultimately lead to inflation. And once the inflation becomes very high and out of control, it will ultimately hamper the growth in the long term. Further, the ability of a central bank to reduce the interest rate also depends on the ability of government to maintain fiscal discipline and to reduce the fiscal deficit. So in case the fiscal deficit is very high, the RBI or the central banks will not be able to reduce the policy rates. So the tussle between the central banks and the governments is another reason for poor monetary policy transmission. Now ultimately the article raises the question that is lowering the interest rates sufficient for increasing the economic growth? So in this regard, one needs to understand that the economic growth and development depends not just on the rates of interest, but also on other factors of production. For example, it will depend on land, capital, labor, etc., and also on favorable economic environment. So in this line, it has been highlighted that the injection of capital through the maintenance of lower interest rates by the way of reduction in the policy rates alone is not sufficient to boost the economy. So what is required besides the lowering of economic growth is the simplified land acquisition process and also imparting the skill development to the workforce. And if such supporting measures are not undertaken, the lowering of interest rate will not be able to increase the economic growth in the short term as well as the long term. Now, after understanding this article, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And we have already discussed in this article what is meant by the term monetary policy transmission, how does this happen, and also is lowering of interest rate a sufficient condition for spurring the economic growth. With this, let's move to the next article. This article on page number 15 talks about a threat to the tiger population in India from a virus. So what is important in this article for us from the preliminary examination point of view is the name of that virus. And this will form a part of the preliminary examination under the General Studies paper 1 under the topic Environmental Ecology and Biodiversity. Now the wildlife biologists have raised the concern regarding a virus which is known as the canine distemper virus. And this virus can be transmitted from the canine distemper virus infected dogs into the tigers. So the dogs which are infected with the canine distemper virus and which are living in and around the wildlife sanctuaries where the tigers are also found are likely to infect the tigers, and ultimately it can be a serious threat to the tiger population in those sanctuaries. Now this canine distemper virus is a contagious and serious disease which is caused by a virus which attacks the respiratory, gastrointestinal and nervous system of the dogs. Now here it is important for you to know that last year many lions died in the Gir forest in Gujarat. And the reason for the death of 23 lions in the Gujarat was the canine distemper virus. So that is why what is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view is the name of this canine distemper virus. With this, let's move to the next article. Now this article on page number 7 talks about a dam which is being constructed on the Subansiri river in Assam. And the activists in Assam are opposing the clearance which was given by the National Green Tribunal for the construction of a 2000 megawatt dam on this river. Now what is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view is the river Subansiri, which is a tributary of the river Brahmaputra. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic geography. Now if you look at the previous year questions in the year 2016, there was a question related to the tributaries of Brahmaputra. So in this background, let us understand the main tributaries of Brahmaputra from the NCERT of class 11th, which is the Indian Physical Environment or the Physical Geography of India. Now the third chapter of the NCERT of class 11th of Geography, which is known as the India Physical Environment, talks about the drainage systems of India. And in this it talks about the drainage system which originates from the Himalayas. For example, the Ganga river system, the Indus river system, and also the Brahmaputra river system. Besides the Himalayan drainage, this chapter also talks about the peninsular drainage, which talks about the important rivers of peninsular India like the Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri, etc. And also it highlights the various west flowing rivers which are small in nature, and two important west flowing rivers are Tapi and Narmada. So in this background from this chapter, let us understand the key features of the Brahmaputra river system and the main tributaries of the river Brahmaputra. So regarding the river Brahmaputra, it says that it has its origin in the Shema-Yungdung glacier of the Kailash range near the Mansarovar lake. So the origin or the glacier from which the rivers originate is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And in the prelims of 2019, there was a question which asked us to identify the pairs of rivers and glaciers if they were correctly matched or not. Further, it states that the river Brahmaputra is known as the Sangpo river in the Tibet. And in the Tibet, it has a right bank tributary which is known as the Rango Sangpo. Further, it forms a deep gorge at the Namcha Barwa in Arunachal Pradesh in Himalayas. And when it enters into Arunachal Pradesh, it is known as the Siang or the Dihang river. Further, the main left bank tributaries in the Arunachal Pradesh are the Dibang or the Sikang and the Lohit rivers. And once these tributaries merge, it is known as Brahmaputra in India. So the major left bank tributaries of the Brahmaputra river are the Budhi Dihang, Dhansari, while the important right bank tributaries of the Brahmaputra are the Subansiri, Kameng, Manas and the Sankosh rivers. And regarding the Subansiri river, it says that it has its origin in Tibet and is an antecedent river. Further, in Bangladesh, the Tista river joins the Brahmaputra on its right bank, and from there it is known as the Jamuna. And finally, this river Brahmaputra or the Jamuna merges with the Padma river in Bangladesh, and from there it drains its water into the Bay of Bengal. So all these facts related to Brahmaputra are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view, and especially the tributaries of the river Brahmaputra. So besides Brahmaputra, you should go through this chapter and learn the major river systems of India and important tributaries of all the major rivers of India. And also you should be aware of the glaciers from which these rivers originate. Now if you look at the question which was asked in 2016, it reads, which of the following are tributary or tributaries of the river Brahmaputra? And the options given are Dibang, Kameng and Lohit. And the correct answer here was D, that is all the three are the tributaries of Brahmaputra. So this question highlights that important tributaries of the major rivers of India can be asked in your preliminary examination. So you should prepare the important tributaries of all major rivers of India from the NCERT. With this, let's move to the next article. Now this article in the Sunday magazine on the page number 14 talks about an important sanctuary of southern India which is known as the Ranganathittu bird sanctuary. So this forms a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic general issues on biodiversity. So in this, let us understand some key features and the location of the Ranganathittu bird sanctuary. So here it is important to note that the Ranganathittu bird sanctuary is located in the state of Karnataka. Further, it comprises of 6 islets on the banks of river Kaveri. So as you can see in this map, The Ranganathittu bird sanctuary is located on the banks of Kaveri river and it comprises of 6 islets of which 4 are shown in this map. Now this sanctuary is an important place for various bird species and till now roughly 170 bird species have been recorded. And in winters it is an important destination for the migratory birds from Siberia and Latin America. Now recently this bird sanctuary was affected by the floods and there was severe soil erosion in the islands of this bird sanctuary. And that is what has been highlighted in this article. However, from preliminary examination point of view, you should restrict yourself to the location of the Ranganathittu bird sanctuary and also the river on which this bird sanctuary is located. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 14 highlights the issue of detention centers or migrant camps in India. In this context, the Home Ministry or the Union Home Ministry has issued guidelines for creation of such detention centers. And these guidelines were formulated after a PIL was filed in the Supreme Court, which highlighted the poor conditions that were prevailing in the detention centers or the migrant camps in Assam. So in this context, let us understand what are the detention centers, what is the legal framework for setting up of such detention centers, why were such guidelines required, and what are the important features of these guidelines. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic governance. Now the detention centers are set up to house illegal migrants or foreigners who have completed their jail sentences. However, their deportation process to their respective countries have not been initiated or completed. So mainly these detention centers are created for housing illegal immigrants and foreigners who are overstaying in India and have not been deported to their concerned countries. Now these centers are set up to restrict the movement of foreigners who are staying back illegally, and this ensures their physical availability all the times for expeditious repatriation or deportation. Presently there are 6 detention centers in Assam, which is the highest for any state. And these detention centers are likely to increase by 10 centers in Assam after the completion of the process of National Register for Citizens or the NRC. Now, what is the legal framework for setting up of such detention centers? So, under the Foreigners Act of 1946, the central government has the powers to deport foreign nationals staying illegally in the country. And similarly, such powers have been entrusted to state governments under the Article 258(1) of the Constitution and under the Article 239(1) of the Administrators of Union Territories. Now, why did the Union Ministry issue the guidelines for setting up of such detention centers? So recently a PIL was filed with the Supreme Court which highlighted the poor conditions prevailing in the detention centers in Assam. The PIL further highlighted that the members of the same family who were declared foreigners were put in camps which were separated from each other. Further, the PIL highlighted the absence of guidelines governing such detention centers and also highlighted that the Assam government has failed to distinguish between jails and detention centers, and these detainees have been treated as convicts. So in the background of this public interest litigation, the centre responded to Supreme Court that it would again create new guidelines for keeping foreign nationals in the detention centres across the country. So after this, let us look at what are the highlights of these guidelines. So the main features of these guidelines are that the states do not require any specific approval from the Home Ministry to set up detention centres. Further, the Home Ministry has clarified that such detention centers should be set up outside the jail premises and their numbers and size should be decided by the states, keeping in view the actual number of foreigners to be housed as well as the progress in the deportation proceedings. Further, these detention centers should be designed for inmates to maintain the standards of living in consonance with the human dignity. So in this context, the detention centers should be well lit, there should be airy rooms, which are adhering to basic hygiene standards, should be equipped with electricity, water and communication facilities. Further, on the completion of sentence of the foreigner, the jail authorities concerned may hand over the foreign national to the authority in charge of detention center. Further, it should be ensured that the members of the same family are not separated and all the family members are housed in the same detention centers. Now, this article is not very important from our exam point of view. However, you should be aware of the issue of detention centers in the background of the National Register for Citizens or the NRC issue which is going on in the Assam. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, after today's discussion, let us take up these practice questions and the answer for them will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the first question reads, which of the following minerals are found in the polymetallic nodules? And the options are manganese, nickel and cobalt. And as we have learned in today's discussion, all the three minerals are found in the polymetallic nodules. The second is that the canine distemper virus is known to affect which of the following? So as we have learned in today's discussion, it is known to affect the lions and there is a threat that it can affect the tigers also. So the correct answer is A. After this, you should try both these questions and the answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the first question reads, which of the following are the tributaries of Brahmaputra river? And the options are Subansiri, Kameng and Teesta. And as we have learned, all the three are the tributaries of Brahmaputra river. So the option D is correct, that is 1, 2 and 3. And finally, a very simple question, that the Ranganathittu bird sanctuary is located on which of the following rivers? And the correct answer here is C, that is Kaveri. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let's move on to the question for the day.